What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. So in this episode, we're going to be working on getting the Welder Series Mustang 2 front end all mocked up and tacked in and assembled on Twin Snail Mail so that we can get the frame back on the body so that we can make sure we got the wheels centered in the wheel well opening and everything sitting right and looking good the way it's supposed to be. We're going to go over a step-by-step process on getting the Mustang 2 front end hooked up and going in the car. And we are going to have to box the frame because unfortunately the factory frame boxing was pretty thin sheet metal on the inside, so I just didn't feel like that was going to be strong enough to hold it. So that being said, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Check out our website, ftpspeedshop.com. Pick yourself up some merch. Let's get this frame boxed. I got this boxing plate template. We're going to have to go ahead and box the upper part of this frame. I thought this was going to be good enough since it was already boxed, but after closer inspection, it's pretty thin gauge metal. So we're going to just go ahead and box it with this 1/8 inch stuff that we have so that everything is the same. It'll be the same thickness as this. I made this plate right here for this side. Fits pretty nice around this front crossmember tube, whatever the hell we want to call it. And then it also works good for this side, so the frame rails are the same. It's just going to be a little bit shorter, so I'll just have to cut it right there. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're going to attempt to freehand this with the plasma cutter. I'm not the greatest at freehanding, so this could be a little bit of a shit show. So I'm going to go grab the metal and get it set up, and here we'll just probably freehand it right on top of the frame here. Hell, it fits like a glove. That shit fits pretty damn decent. I think I can fill that with weld pretty easily there. Alright guys, got the boxing plates fitted. Everything's ground down and cleaned up. For the most part, still a little bit of rust in some of those tight spots I couldn't get into, but calling that good enough for now. I'm going to just start tacking it here, and then I'll move this clamp up. Everything should be pretty good right there. So it should be a nice good penetration on that weld there. Let's fire up the welder. We're laying out this Welder Series Mustang 2 front end. And Z line right here, which is our center of the wheel line, that correlates to the center of the rear wheels, the same distance on both sides, so everything's nice and square and true with the frame. Front cross member is 1 7/8 forward, rear cross member is 1 7/8 behind it. For the front tower, it is 4 inches ahead, and the rear tower is 3 inches behind the Z center line. So what I did was I clamped my level on the frame right at the Z line, clamped it down, and then I pulled the number off of the level that way and this way, making sure that I kept my tape perpendicular to this so that my tape wasn't running down at an angle, so that all my numbers would be actually true to where they needed to be. So that 4 inches, you know, you got to hold the tape up like that. And then I did that for both sides. And I just took a long level and laid it across each one of my marks, right on the mark line, and then just drew my line straight across. So I made sure my marks were all square to the frame. I then leveled lines down from each mark on the top side of the frame to aid in the alignment of the cross member in the next step. Next step of the process is making sure that we have the proper upper arm clearance, and to do that we measure back from Z 5.5 inches. Again, we want to keep it on the level plane. We don't want to roll it down because you see how it's shorter. And that number should be, if we're using stock spindles, which we are, that number will be 4 3/4 plus H, and H is the center line of our wheels, which is 13.5, which netted us an 18 1/4. And if we go straight down from that, we are just right at 18 1/4. I think we'll be fine with that. If we're not, I'm gonna have to go notch the top of the frame right here. I'm gonna call that good for this because it is so damn close. The next step is at the front tower point, which is 4 inches in front of Z. We need to be more than 3/8 of an inch to the bottom of the frame from H. And we are at 16, so we have 2.5 inches there, so we have plenty of room for that. This dimension is to make sure we have enough room for our rack to slide through there so that we don't have any clearance issues. If this was tighter, this frame actually kind of arches up. So if the frame was flat here or arched down, we might have to come in here and notch that for the rack and pinion bellows. So that all worked out good, and we're ready to move on to the next step, which is notching the crossmember and getting the crossmember cut. So to do that, I have my handy dandy laser here. We got our laser set up at spindle height, or H. So I'm just verifying that the laser is leveled and everything is sitting at 13.5. Because the cross members come with a nice little notch in both the front and the rear cross members, and that notch correlates to H, or spindle height, center line of spindle. So we can now determine the height measuring off of our laser line to the bottom of the frame at cross member rear and cross member front, and that will give us the height that we need to notch the cross member. And then we can also determine the width based on the width of the frame, centering it in between the cross member, and that'll give us our notch. 1 3/16 at rear cross member. That is our mark. Make a note of that on the frame, and that is, let's see, R. And then we'll go ahead and measure down from the front, and we'll just put the tape right at the crossmember front level line, 1 13/16. We'll go ahead and check that on the other side and make sure all that is within reason the same. 1 1/8 on this side. See what CF is. Right at 1 3/4-ish. So we're basically, what, a 1/16 off across from the frame, and that could just be with different variations of frame. I'll probably throw a level across the bottom and see what this reads, just to see how close it is. Because I'm betting what the issue is that this frame's probably not perfectly flat here where we're measuring it. So I think we're going to see that level's probably just a tad bit off. Well, let's see if I can get it in here. Yeah, showing this side's probably a 1/16 or so higher. Across the bottom. Okay guys, so here's the two cross members. This is the rear cross member upper. This is the front lower. That just means that it's got the bottom fold on it. This has a top fold on it. So what I did is I went and took measurements, or previously we took the measurements for the height at each point based off that laser level. This is spindle height here. Went ahead and transferred those numbers over, drew a level line across, or a straight line across, and then took the frame dimensions. This is inside a frame to inside of frame, this is outside of frame to outside of frame. The instructions state basically if the frame is wider than this outer point, then you will weld to the inside. If the frame is narrower than this outer point, then you'll weld to the outside. My frame, of course, falls right in the middle. This is just a real skinny leg. I don't think that's going to give much for structure, so I'm going to go ahead and probably just cut this L out right here. This seems stronger to me to weld to this and at the bottom and leave that lip on the outside. I could just do a U-cut and weld all 3 sides if I wanted to, but I just don't see a lot of structure from that little 3/8 chunk, so we're going to go ahead and just cut these off right there on both of these. We'll get those cut out and then we will start welding the crossmember together. Once we have the crossmember notched and tacked together, we're going to go ahead and test fit it in. One mistake I did make was I measured my frame width from the top of the frame, and there was a slight difference between the top and the bottom of the frame. So after test fitting it, I realized that it wouldn't fit in there, and I had to adjust my notches just slightly, about 1/16 of an inch, so that I could get it to slide up into the frame. Alright, in order to get the crossmember perfectly level is what we're shooting for. Whether the bottom side of the frame rails are perfectly level or not is irrelevant. We want to set our crossmember up to perfectly level. So in order to do that, we're going to have to take the crossmember back out and take it over, clamp it up in the vise, and do a little bit of grinding on whatever side needs to go up on the crossmember so that we can get the crossmember sitting perfectly level in the frame. Because this vehicle is going to be right-hand drive, we will not be able to utilize the factory Mustang 2 rack and pinion style steering, and we will be using a Dodge Omni rear-mounted rack flipped to the front side. So we're going to go ahead and chop off these factory Mustang 2 rack mounts right now, and we'll be welding on the new Omni flip rack mounts here shortly. All right, guys, this is why we tack weld everything in place and do a little mock-up. Got the front suspension on there and mocked up, and found that the ball joint was binding with only about 3 inches of drop. So that's not going to get us low enough to lay out. So I need to come in here and I'm going to notch these down 2 inches more. So the front end will have a slight rake to it. I just cannot get enough fall with the upper control arms in order to get that 6 inches of drop, which I was afraid probably would be an issue. So we figured everything out with what my original thought and plan was, mocked it up, found out that wasn't going to work, cut it free. I'm going to go ahead and notch these guys down 2 inches down into here, and we'll get it slid back up there. I'll probably go ahead and while I got it out again, weld all these guys up. It'll just be easier to do while it's on the bench. Since everything was cut and perfectly leveled but sitting at the bottom of the frame, I'm just going to measure 2 inches down from this plane right here where it sat on the frame on all of these and cut that off, and that should put us in the exact same spot that we were, just 2 inches higher. 17 minus 13 and a half. 3.5 inch notch. Burn an inch. 4.5. Now that we have our upper tower mount notched, it's time to get it located on the frame. So in order to locate the upper tower on the frame, we need to find point TF and draw a level line straight down. And where that level line intersects line H, aka the bottom of our mount, because we did all of our measurements from that line H, I went ahead and set a piece of angle iron on that level line. Our line H just happened to be just below the frame rail itself. The upper control arm mount will sit at a 4-degree canter to the rear, and that's to aid in anti-dive. As I stated earlier, tower front and H will be the bottom of the tower because that was where all of our measurements were taken. I used a degree finder to double check the upper and just to make sure everything was where it needed to be. I zeroed out the degree finder on the piece of angle iron just to make sure that we had that sitting at its 4 degrees canted to the rear. And I leveled the top side of that, which is the standard level, and then once we had it level and at 4 degrees, we tacked it and burned it home. To determine the upper airbag mounting location, I installed the upper and lower control arms and spindles and cycled them. I know that my airbag fully collapsed height is 2.7 inches, so with that in mind, I cycled the suspension all the way up or the frame all the way down and determined the distance between my lower control arm mounting point and the upper bag mount to be approximately 3.5 inches. This will give me some wiggle room just in case I screwed up on my math somewhere. I then set the upper bag mount level in both directions and burned it home. Definitely lays out, hell yeah. It's all the way down in the frame. This bitch is gonna drag body. Fuck yeah. That's fucking sweet.